All right, we are back, and today, oh, nope, gotta look at you. Gotta keep my eye on you, because sometimes I look up there. And if I'm looking up there, then it looks weird, but if I look at you, now we're talking. Now, often in the hunting industry, all the content that you guys out there are consuming, they're from two different things. One, from somebody on a pro staff somewhere who's giving you information about a bow because they're getting paid to do it. They're either getting compensated through free gear or some money, but they're getting paid to talk about that product. And, sometimes, like, while they all mean well and they are telling you honestly their opinions, probably, hopefully, whatever, if you're getting a check from that company, it's hard to be super honest about what's going on. Like, if I'm a Ford race car driver, I'm not going to tell you that the engine's crap. So you have a lot of content out there that's coming from those guys. You also have content that gets released from dudes at the bow shop that just literally open a box, pull a bow out, shoot it, and tell you, hey man, this is the greatest bow ever. And they're just reading off the spec sheet for that bow, and they're not able to really give you like a true opinion of it. Being that I'm able to hunt as much as I do, and I'm also super anal about tuning and getting a bow set up right, I thought it'd be really cool to get a bunch of bows from every main manufacturer out there, get their flagship bow, and put it through its paces. I'm going to take it on hunts with me. I'm going to beat the crap out of it. I'm going to get it super tuned, and I'm going to give you guys my true, honest feedback. None of these companies are paying me. They did send me these bows for free, but all of them sent me the bows for free. So it's not like I'm kissing butt on one of them or the other one. And the trade-off is that you guys are watching this video. I think it's a really cool way to get baseline feedback for you guys and give you my true, honest opinion. And today we're jumping in and we're talking about the Bowtech SR350. Now, this bow gets a rap as a speed bow. It is fast. The 350 is not just a made-up number. That's the IBO speed on this bow. It's a 33-inch ATA, which is pretty sweet. I like that little bit longer ATA. It's got some bigger cams on it, so that string angle is really nice when you get to it. It's a 6-inch brace height bow, and it tips the scales at a little over 4 pounds. I think it's like 4.2 or 4.4. I'd have to check, but I don't think anybody out there is really caring about weight. I'm certainly not. If I cared about how much weight I was carrying to the tree stand with me, I'd start jogging. That 350 speed is on performance setting. There are two different settings on the module, either performance or comfort. For my intended purposes, I'm running the bow in comfort mode. The performance draw cycle really wasn't that bad though. I just kind of like the comfort better. It was more used to what I was used to. Initially, I think a lot of people gave this bow feedback because it is a true speed bow. It's a performance bow, but the draw cycle is great. I really liked it. Very smooth draw cycle and just kind of comes into the back wall. The valley is very nice. It doesn't stack really hard. It doesn't draw really hard at the beginning. It's just a nice smooth draw. Very similar to every other Bowtech I've shot with the binary cam system. I really like it. I mean, you just pull on it and then it hits a back wall. The back wall is super solid, but it's not stiff up front. Overall, very impressed with the bow. Let's talk through how I set it up, what I went through building it, and then some real-world examples of shooting it. Now, one really cool thing about this bow is it has the Deadlock tuning system on it. The Deadlock system is something that nobody else on the market has. When you're tuning pretty much any bow out there, they have some way of moving that cam over so you can fine-tune arrow flight without having to adjust the center shot on your rest. Now, normally on like a Matthews or a PSE or a Hoyt, Matthews has the top hat system where you swap the top hats. Elite used to have shims. They've now gone to a different system that's kind of similar to Deadlock, but it adjusts the limb pockets. We'll get into that in a different video. But the Deadlock system is the only system on the market that allows you to just loosen a set screw and then make minor adjustments on a worm drive system with an Allen key and make micro adjustments to that top and bottom cam. And this is so nice. Very, very cool. The fact that you don't have to press the bow and remove anything is a huge win. I loved the Deadlock system. These were one of the fastest bows between the SR350 and I also have a Revolt XL. that we can get into later. That's a different video as well. But the Deadlock system, this SR350 was one of the fastest bows I've ever tuned, hands down. I literally shot it through paper, made a couple adjustments on the Deadlock system, shot it again at 15 yards, made a couple micro adjustments, and then went outside and started ripping. So the Deadlock system, really, really pretty cool. It's very nice to not have to remove an axle and change out top hats or change shims out. I am notorious for having an E-clip go missing in the middle of the night. It really bothers me when something goes flying off and then I can't put it back together. So this definitely removes that entire possibility of happening, which is awesome. I'm setting this bow up with a black gold dual track sight, which is pretty sweet. I really like the vertical pins, and I really like the fact that I can adjust that bottom pin to get it exactly where I want. So I like to run mine at 20 yards and 30 yards. Previously, when I was running dual pins like the Ultra View, I'd run them at 25 and 35 just because I felt like there was only a micro difference in impact between 20 and 25, and I liked having to hold a little low at 30 or a little high. I decided to set this one up at 20 and 30. I've just run pins 20, 30, 40 my entire life, and I didn't want to get in a situation or a scenario where I had like the buck of a lifetime standing at 27 yards and I shot over his back. So 20, 30, but you can run it whatever you want. I just like that 10-yard gap, and you can set it up however you choose fit. I have the Ripcord Max drop away rest. I'm running an Octane stabilizer and a Octane peep. Ooh. You got your bow, you're taking it out of the box. Let's walk through every step that I take to get the bow set up, shoot it in, and then I do my super tuning. And the reason that I take those processes, I kind of like to make sure that those strings settle. You know, they don't move a ton, if any, but by shooting it a handful of times, I'm just getting more used to the bow and then really getting a better opportunity at that final tune. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bow, I'm going to put it in my bow vise, I'm going to make sure it's level on both horizontal and vertical axes, you know, make sure it's plumb, and then I put the rest on. When I put the rest on, I'm also going to make sure that the rest is sitting level. If you get it kind of whopper jaw, that's a industry standard term there. If you get it whopper jaw, you know, you might have issues with the drop away, either hitting the riser or getting arrow contact or whatever. So I just like to make sure that the bow is perfectly vertical, perfectly plumb, and then I get the rest on there absolutely as close to perfectly horizontal as possible. Once I've got the rest on there and I've made sure that the rest also is far enough back that I want it to be, it's not up tight to the riser and getting contact on the shelf. I like to run it just a little bit back. I'm going to take the sight, I'm going to take it out of the box, and I like to make sure that my first, second, and third axis are set before I put it on the bow and verify that. So what I'm doing is I have a tool that I can attach the sight to, I can level that out, and I can do my first, second, and third axis. And this is really important because, you know, your sight is in line with your rest, but if you have them off, then your point of impact is going to change horizontally because you're actually not shooting it perfectly vertical. So if you're shooting your bow like an LA gangster from the 90s, yelling, "Brace yourself, fool," you're going to notice that that arrow impact is drastically off from your point of aim. So it's very important that you get your first, second, and third axis level so that you know that your bow is perfectly plumb when you're shooting, that arrow is leaving perfectly straight, but then also you're making sure that when you're sliding that sight up and down, that the sight head is moving in a perfectly vertical line and it's not going one way or the other to where as you get to 30, 40, 50 yards, you're getting like a variation in impact. So very important to take that sight, take the time, set your first, second, and third axis, and then move on to the next step of putting it on the bow. So once those axes are set, I then put it on the bow, tighten it down, good to go, and move on to the next step. So then I'm going to take the bow, and sometimes I'll leave it in my bow vise. In this case, I'd actually lost my little clip that I use to put my keep my nock in place. But the next thing that I do is I tie the nock points in. So on this specific bow, I put it in my my bow press, and I just held it there and then held perfectly vertical on it. I actually kind of like to put it in my bow vise more than I like it in my bow press, but it's really the same thing. The only reason I like that is it just gives me a little bit more room for these big old sausages attached to biscuits as palms of getting in there and working on the strings. But it's really helpful either way. Tie your knock points in. If you don't know how to tie knock points, pause this video, go do a search, but it's just a double overhand knot back and forth on either side. Now, once those knock points are in, I'm then going back to my bow vise, and this is why I just prefer to leave it in there, but I'm going to set the rest. I'm going to make sure that those knock points are tied and the rest is set so that the arrow is running dead level through the burger hole. Absolutely dead level through the burger hole. Where? Dead level through the burger hole, straight. Once I know that it's dead level through the burger hole and the arrow is perfectly level, I then will tie my D-loop on. But sometimes I need to make micro adjustments to those D-loops to move them slightly up or slightly down. And I also like to make sure that there's just a subtle amount of pressure on the knock itself so that there's just no way that knock can wiggle up or down the serving even by a half a strand. So I really want to make sure that those knock points are on there in a manner that keep the arrow in the exact same spot every time. So once those knock points are on, then I'm tying my D-loop on, and it's time to time my rest. Double time. Now the arrow is perfectly set. We've confirmed that the knock points on the top and bottom are perfect. The arrow is dead level. It's running level through your burger hole, and it's at 13/16 inches from the riser. So it's at the perfect center shot in the riser. It's level. The D-loop is tied on, and now we're headed over to the drawboard, and we're going to time the rest and also the cams. So the first thing I'm going to do is time the cams because I don't want to be making adjustments to the cam timing and then have to modify the rest. So I'm going to draw the bow back, and I'm going to make sure that both cams are hitting at the perfect time. In the event that one cam is hitting instead of the other, what I like to do is draw the bow on a bow scale and see where we are on the weight and also figure out where we are with an ATA and brace height. I'm going to make adjustments to either put twists in or take twists out based on where the bow is in relation to spec. For example, if you have a 70-pound bow, the limbs are all the way in, but you're only getting 68 pounds of draw weight, then I know that we need to add twists to the bow. So that would also be obvious because it would be out of spec. It would be too long on the ATA. So by knowing where the bow is, you're always working towards spec. Or, for example, if I know that I just want the bow to run a little hotter, I might put a couple twists in the control cable. But you want to be careful to not take the bow too far out of spec or too far past where a bow should be. So in the event that one cam is hitting before the other, let's say the top cam is hitting below the bottom, before the bottom cam, what I'm going to do is see where that bow relates to spec, whether to know if I need to slow a cam down or speed a cam up. And the way that you do that is you put twists in a string to speed a cam up and take a twist out to slow it down. It's always important to work off spec. Once those cams are timed, I'm now going to take the rest, pull the activation cord through the control cable. I'm going to draw it back. I'm going to get the timing perfect where that rest is just rising with about an inch left in the draw cycle. That means that when the cam is an inch away from hitting the cable stop or limb stop, depending on the bow, in this case, hitting the cable, that rest, when there's an inch left in the draw cycle, the rest is just starting to go up. That prevents too much tension being on the string, the downward cable, but also makes sure that you have enough tension on it that the rest will activate when you shoot. All right, so now you've got your accessories installed. You have the rest set up, it's timed, your cams are timed, and you've confirmed that your arrow is running level through the burger hole, and it's at 13/16 from the riser. Now it's time to tune your bow. Now before I go through the entire process of super tuning a bow, I like to take the bow out, and I'll just put, 200 arrows through it. I'm not doing this all in one day. I'm just going to shoot it for about a week, right? I'm going to take it outside. I'm going to shoot it in the yard while I'm kind of hanging out. I'm going to get used to this bow, get used to the draw cycle, get used to my holding, kind of just become one with the bow. As corny as that sounds, I really want to become familiar with it. Once I'm super familiar with the bow, it's got a lot of shots through it to where I know the strings are fully shot in. Now it's time to super tune it. Now, Some people will say, hey, look, you don't need to shoot in new bows. All the strings are so good, etc. Yeah, I get that. But I know that if I shoot the bow and I get used to it, nothing bad can happen. So, what's the worst that can happen if I shoot the bow 150 to 200 times? Nothing. That's why I'm going to do that, and I'm going to make a point to shoot those strings in before I go through tuning the bow. So, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bare shaft, and the bare shaft that I have, I've weighed out electrical tape on the back of that weighs the exact same as my wrap and my 4 fletch combination. I think it's important to do that just to make sure that you're tuning with what you're taking to the field with you and what you're shooting. Is it absolutely necessary? No, but again, like what's the worst that could happen, right? So I just have a couple bare shafts that have been proven to work well for me, and I have a little bit of electrical tape on them. You can also do this pretty easily by just cutting the fletching off the base where it's attached to your arrow. I've done that as well. Is it exactly apples to apples? No. It's within a couple grains though, and that's normally good enough for government work around here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that bare shaft and I'm going to shoot through paper at 6 feet, and I'm going to look at the tear. Sometimes you get a perfect bullet hole out of the box, but very rarely does that happen. And once I get that tear, my adjustment is going to be made according to what the tear is. If I do get a vertical tear, so knock high or knock low, the first thing I'm going to do is put the bow back on my bow vise and make sure that arrow is level. Sometimes the string will have settled in a manner that gets it sitting a little knock high or a little knock low. And in that manner, I'll either cut off the D-loop and move the knock points up or down, or see how drastic it is, and sometimes maybe make a change to the rest. But most of the time, I want to leave that rest where the arrow is running dead level, dead center through the burger hole. I'll just readjust the knock points and then put a new D-loop on it. So if you get a vertical tear and you check it on the bow vise and the arrow is still dead level, perfectly plumb, I will then check the cam timing on the drawboard. Normally, I can feel when a cam is out of time. There's a very big difference between when you're drawing a bow and it goes thump, thump, and it's kind of squishy into the back wall versus when you're drawing a bow, it's through the valley and bam, right there. So you can really feel it once you get used to feeling what a tuned bow feels like. But I will check the drawboard and I will check the arrow levelness before I make any changes. I think too often people will make changes, but they didn't check what possibly happened with their strings settling, and that creates a problem. Check it on the bow vise, check it on the drawboard. If the bow vise check is good and the drawboard check is good, then you need to make a slight adjustment to either the rest or your cam timing. There have been times where checking my drawboard, it looks like everything's hitting it the same, but maybe that bow needs like a half a twist. Very rare though. Normally, if it looks right on the drawboard and the arrow's dead level, you're going to get a perfect hole. But that's worth checking. And obviously, this goes without saying, make sure that you're tuning with properly spined arrows. If you have a weak spine arrow, you're going to be chasing your tail here, literally. So make sure your arrows are spined properly. In the event that you have a horizontal tear, this is where the deadlock system truly shines. You literally just add a half a twist or a quarter twist or a half a twist or 3 twists, however many you need to move that cam in the manner that the tear needs adjusting. If you have a knock left tear, you want to move it in the direction that the tear is, and that will clean it up. A little goes a long way with this system, but start at 6 feet and shoot and make micro adjustments until you have an absolute perfect bullet hole. Now, form is essential here. If you're working on your form, you're a new archer, then, I would suggest working on your form before you try this, because you cannot hide any air in the bow or your form when you're shooting through paper. So make sure your form is good. Make sure you're not punching the trigger. Make sure you're adding very good pressure to the palm of your bow hand. A good thing that somebody told me a long time ago was try to push your stabilizer directly to the target. And that's a great way to make sure that you're not imparting any bit of torque onto that bow grip. But once you have adjusted for those horizontal and vertical tears at 6 feet through paper with a bare shaft, and again, this is where that deadlock system really shines, saves a lot of time. I then will step back to 15 yards. It's actually like 14 yards And that's because that's as far as I have to shoot down here in my basement. And I'll shoot through paper again. Now, I like to shoot a fletched arrow at 14 yards. I've read in a couple places that that's the maximum distance before an arrow will stabilize and catch itself. So you really can find some major flaws in arrow flight with the fletched arrow. I'll also shoot a bare shaft, but I'm less worried about the bare shaft than I am the fletch shaft at this distance, because this is going to show me if there's any fletching contact, any flaw at all. So while I'm shooting at 15 yards, I will make micro adjustments to the deadlock system here. I'm like talking an eighth of a turn, maybe a quarter turn max on the top and bottom cams at the same time to get that hole absolutely perfect. Sometimes you need more of a micro adjustment, and that's where like a 32nd or a 64th of an inch on your rest is really pivotal. But I'm going to shoot through paper and make sure I get that perfect bullet hole at 14 and a half yards down here in my basement before I take it to the next step. So again, deadlock system's truly shining here. Shoot through at 14 yards, 14.5, and you're good to go. After this step, I have never had a bow that needed more tuning, but I still take it the next step, shocker, to check it. So the next thing that I'll do is I'll go outside to my home range on a day where it's not blowing wind, and I'll take 3 bare shafts and 3 fletch shafts outside. I'll start at 10 yards, and I'll shoot 3 bare shafts and 3 fletch shafts at the same hole. And what I'm looking for is a group together, like a perfect group together. Sometimes I might just shoot them at different dots if I know that bow is really smoking, because I don't want to break arrows at 10 yards. Then I step back to 20 yards. I'm shooting at the same dot. From 20 yards, I might need to make a micro adjustment where the bare shaft is hitting just a little right or a little left of my fletch group. And I'll make like a 32nd or a 64th of an inch adjustment. Again, very rare for this to happen for me, but I will still make those adjustments. Then I'll step back to 30 yards just for fun, because I think I'm a little sadistic and I just enjoy shooting it again and knowing that it's absolutely perfect. And I will shoot those arrows again at 30 yards and make sure that I'm getting a perfect group. When I have a baseball size group at 30 yards with fletched arrows and bare shaft, there is no head on the market that I cannot shoot perfectly. That bow is absolutely Supertune. And that's what I did with this Bowtech. The Bowtech, I walked through those entire paces and it was just flawless. The deadlock system saved me a lot of time, a lot of hassle, and overall, I really enjoyed the bow. I'm shooting a 550 grain arrow at a 30-inch draw length at about 267 feet per second. For me, that's like pretty much perfect. It's very fast. It's very quiet. I love the smooth draw and solid back wall, and it's been an absolute killer in the tree with me. I've shot, I don't know, probably 12, 14 deer with it so far this season, and I'm really liking it. I hope this guide helps you follow along and super tune your bow. But also, I hope that if you're watching this and you're thinking about getting a Bowtech or looking at the deadlock system, definitely check it out. It is awesome how easy it is to tune a bow using the deadlock. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, comments, gripes, if you have gripes, keep them to yourself. But questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. And we have a lot more bows that are going to be in this series. I have a couple more Bowtechs. I got some Hoyts, some Elites, some PSEs, and some Matthews. So if you have another bow that you want to see, let me know. Working on getting a prime here as well. But I hope you guys enjoy the content. And again, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, leave them below. Thanks. We'll see you soon.